Nope.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TED. Today's first presenter is Lauren Fisk.
Thank you and good afternoon. The poet Pablo Neruda writes, "There is no space wider than that of grief. There is no universe like that which bleeds." Today, I am honored to share my TED wish of bridging the global grief gap with you. My name is Lauren Fisk, and the artwork throughout this presentation is by the talented Boston-based artist Rebecca Walensky. First, I'd like to share with you a personal story. My best friend Emily struggled with an eating disorder and drug addiction for many years, throughout middle school and high school. Emily was often in and out of treatment, but there was no continuous, compassionate care that reliably provided enough support for her to build resilience and to overcome her eating disorder. She was often left isolated, separated from school, family, and friends. During her experience with recovery and treatment, Emily witnessed other people in her program not make it. There was support for her eating disorder and for addiction, but not for grief. It helped that she was a brilliant artist, a writer, a photographer, with the dream of becoming a photojournalist and traveling the world. She used her art and her dreams as an outlet to lift her up and to get her through treatment. But in 2010, the cyclical pattern of illness and recovery ended, and she died. But before she did, she was able to gift me this beautiful collage, which is over on the ledge. And I remember her, the bits of her personality, her sense of humor, and I honor her. I cherish the advice that is scattered about, like don't procrastinate, it robs hours of meaning, or self-trust is the first secret to success. And I feel connected to her. Co-creating art that generates art, is extremely powerful. When Emily died, I was plummeted into a whirlwind of grief. For years, I witnessed her in and out of the hospital and not being able to help her know what to do. In my grief healing from losing my best and dearest friend, I took up bookbinding and papermaking as the kinesthetic outlet to work through my emotions, to work through grief. This tale isn't just something of nostalgia. This is the powerful testament that art and creating art left me with something to remember my friend by. And it provided me an outlet that helped me through my grief. This changed my entire life trajectory. I was in art school at the time, and now I'm in the world of global health. This led me to think about the ways in the world, especially the developing world, that this could be a gift to people who have grief from war, from tribal violence, from drought, to mental and physical illness and death. For the past 3 years, I've worked locally. I serve as a facilitator at an organization in Warwick that provides free peer-to-peer support for families and teens. And I serve on campus and host grief support groups. But I'm thinking globally of how in all circumstances, grief work can be accomplished and sustained. I've become aware that this could be done as close as home as a mudslide in Washington State or the streets of Providence, Rhode Island. But I want to see this applied to the world of infectious disease in countries lacking basic healthcare infrastructure. A gap is defined as an unfilled space or an interval, a break in continuity. With grief, it can be a gap in understanding, knowledge, and awareness, or a gap in the availability of resources, treatment, or funding. In 2012, 1.3 million people died from tuberculosis. 1.6 million died of HIV and AIDS. And there were 207 million new cases of malaria. This is just a snapshot in time of only 3 diseases, infectious diseases. Each day, millions of people die from many different causes. We know this. But how often do we think about the people who are lost in this grief gap? How often do we focus on the mental health implications of infectious disease for the patient and for their family? How do we help open the doors to conversation and support in places where there may not be treatment? We know that grief, bereavement practices, views of life and death vary among and within cultures, but grief has biological and psychological implications that are universal. If unaddressed, grief can cause illness. Losing someone or witnessing a traumatic event is an incredible stressor. We know that stress lowers immunity and makes someone more susceptible to disease, making the bigger problem of infectious disease that much more difficult to treat. My wish is Grief Relief International, a unique organization that raises awareness of grief and provides active global engagement in relieving it through the use of culturally respectful and sensitive expressive arts workshops, and through the provision of community facilitator trainings, which prepare leaders to run support groups for grieving people in their community to increase connection, resilience, and empathy. So the expressive arts component would be known as common thread workshops, and they would feature photography, writing and storytelling, book arts, and movement. This is an expressive arts bereavement program conceived to connect grieving individuals in developing countries with resources to support them in their grief journey. So each workshop is tailored specifically to age, geographic location, and is sensitive to their type of trauma, whether it was from war or HIV and AIDS. It's culturally relevant and respectful, and this is accomplished by identifying leaders in their community who want to step up and participate and lead these programs. And no prior art or dance experience is required. It's been proven that expressive arts is helpful for people of all different ages and abilities. So first, photography. We know that there's snapshots in time, and this would be used to develop our stories about grief. So we could provide cameras and explore a common theme and learn a skill. Writing and storytelling, which is the storying and restoring of our lives. Grief and the grieving process is a time of reestablishing your identity. Who are you after you've lost someone? So this is the crafting and telling of our stories. And writing, since it's nonverbal, has been really helpful to express things that you may not feel comfortable expressing verbally. And so it's a great process, and it's very therapeutic. And book arts, something that was really helpful for me. These are the actual tangible vehicles of expression. So we're actually creating places for our stories, and this would be done through beginner, series of books, and then doing collage. This is a great example of use. You could create this for someone who's ill, potentially with tuberculosis, and you could co-create art with them to provide them an activity to do while they're in an isolation hospital, maybe 2 days away from where you are. And then movement, which is the working out of our stories. Through dance, yoga, theater, we'd have visiting artists come in, or artists in the community come in and lead these groups. And then the facilitator training. So we would be creating an international core of community grief relief workers. So what is this? This would be an 8-week program that runs community members through the basics of grief. It gives them a Grief 101, bereavement practices. It would help them with active listening and questioning, and also a primer on expressive arts and how to run and sustain support groups. And then in the time of a global emergency, if there's a hurricane or an earthquake, these members could be called upon in their community or globally if they wish to travel and help supplement the work of aid organizations. And there's a quote, you can't really see it, but this just stresses the importance of community, that a person is a person through other people. And when you're grieving, you can often feel like you're alone and that people don't understand your story. But the more you open up and you realize that there are people going through similar things, especially with an illness or something that has, may have had stigma attached to it in the past, this is a really helpful and therapeutic process if someone will allow it to be that. So my wish is pragmatic, original, transformative, supportive, healing, and it's global. And it's needed now. This is a global movement of solidarity, of connectedness, and awareness. And this is providing people access to modern grief research, help, and trained facilitators. So with your help, this wish could be a reality. Thank you. Questions? Sure. It's okay. Well, I'm actually personally starting this locally in Providence and Pawtucket, but the way that it's designed is through community members and leaders and with sensitivity, so it could be applied anywhere, but it would be tailored to their specific region. So maybe Haiti. I've been studying Haiti this whole semester, and that's an area that could really use some support, but I haven't really picked one set location. Thank you. Any other questions?
So you would be forming an organization, and you would have an infrastructure
Yes.
for that organization. You'd be targeting certain countries that are in crisis and conflict, is that right?
But it could be year-round, so it's not just like one event and then we'd go there. That would be a different component of the facilitator training, because we'd have a core of people that could do that. But this would be for consistent year-round support in places that may not have access to therapy or counseling. And this isn't therapy, so it's all peer-led, it's peer support. So people who are going through what you're going through, who you see every day in your city or your village, and you can connect with them.
So it'd be grief relief without borders.
Sort of. Yep. And so this could start off as just a program that's delivered anywhere, like if we find a building and it's in conjunction with the hospital or somewhere, or eventually scaling up and actually having a tangible, like a place where people could come and do that. So.
Thank you. I have a question.
Sure. I mean, out of all of the grief-stricken areas in the world, how would you select the places where you would work? Would the communities themselves formulate some sort of draft or proposal or something, and then someone would approve it or something like that?
That would be a great idea. I think there would definitely have to be, we'd have to go and see what the community needs. We wouldn't just go into a country and be like, oh wow, you look like you're having a really terrible time. We've been following your, current events. So that could be a process where they apply for it, but I haven't really thought about it yet. Maybe starting a small pilot program in one area and then going from there once we build credibility and a reputation that we provide great services.
Or you could rely with Partners in Health, for example,
Right.
and really identify important areas that need care.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that they need, like, this isn't a replacement for physical care, it's a supplement, and we want to see mental health services and bereavement services on the flip side of the coin. Sure.
How would you go about getting materials you need in order to do the crafting part of this?
That's a great question. So it would be through sponsorship by an art supply company, a paper company, or a school of design, potentially RISD, or someone that I built up a relationship with, so I'd feel comfortable asking them, because that's why hold workshops if you don't have access to paint or paper or anything like that.
Plus universities, there are universities that teach expressive arts, like Salve
Yeah.
Regina University.
Oh,
has
great.
A degree program in that, and so you could have a connection with a university consortium.
That'd be
that would
great.
support it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, please welcome Christina to TED.
Hi, so at the beginning of this semester, we were tasked with the assignment of picking a country that we would like to be a part of, as pretending to be a citizen of that country. And the country I chose was Yemen, without really knowing much about it besides the fact that it was in the Middle East. And over the course of the semester, we've done a lot of work researching our countries and the issues that are a part of the people's lives there. So I've really become kind of connected, I feel, with the issues that the people of this country face. And particularly the times now that they've had the revolution of 2011 and the Arab Spring, they've really come to a point of change where a lot can happen with the government and with the society. So at the beginning, what really shapes Yemen's history is in 600 AD, the introduction of Islam to the area. And after that, it really became a cultural center and a crossroads due to spice and textile trade. So they've really become a really rich culture that has shaped the surrounding area, but also their society today. If you go to Yemen, you can see, obviously this wouldn't work. Is this, oh, is there a power button?
The switch on the side.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It's really become a cultural center, as I was saying. So if you go there today, though, it's really remained unchanged since like 1,000 years ago. If you go there, you can find the same brick mud buildings that were there thousands of years ago. So not much has changed at all in the region, and this is really a time where that can happen. So major problems in Yemen, so right now, are healthcare, literacy, and unemployment. So far, the government hasn't addressed many of those, but they are working towards building a constitution. They've finished up the National Dialogue Conference. That was a big deal in the country. And they're also been meeting with other foreign nations to create certain connections and supporters that will help them move forward in their attempts to create change. But the main problems that they're not really addressing are healthcare, literacy, and unemployment. So healthcare, there's really a wide range of healthcare in Yemen that you can find. This one particularly is a very nice hospital that has been recently built in Sana'a, the capital. And as you can see, it's pretty extensive. It looks really nice, but furthermore, most of the clinics that you might find in more rural areas look like this. This particular hospital has been visited by Doctors Without Borders during the 2011 revolution, where there's a lot of conflict. And the problem with these areas is that it's hard to get supplies there, and they also don't have many resident doctors or clinicians that can help patients. So Doctors Without Borders actually had to leave this location when conflict became particularly bad, and they then couldn't treat the afflicted people. So other healthcare challenges, 35% do not have access to healthcare, 45% are food insecure, so there's a lot of malnutrition that contributes to diseases. There's limited water resources, and 54% of the population or more is in poverty. Literacy is also a contributing problem to this. There, 82% of males are literate, but 45% of females most of females are not literate, and that's a big problem going forward, I think, because that really stops them from getting an education, starting jobs, a career, or anything like that. And the major problem that contributes to this is the fact that women traditionally have been consigned to the home. They're supported by their husbands financially, and they're just expected to raise children and cook and clean for their husband, basically. And they're not really expected to get higher education unless their husband pays for it, which is rather rare. Unemployment, this was the main issue that started the revolution back in 2011. And the government has begun to focus on adolescents, 60% of which are unemployed, but they haven't really started focusing on any other group in Yemen. So, as I see it, women have a really opportunity here to begin to create change in Yemen. And clearly the government is not about to start helping that, because it would cause a bit of conflict possibly given the history of Yemen and their very strong traditional values. But I think it's highly possible that this change can occur. And through my TED Wish, which would be to empower women in Yemen, I would like to create a kind of clinic combined with a school where Yemeni women could go there to learn how to become possibly midwives or nurses, doctor's assistants, through a program where they don't have to be literate, but they'd be taught through scenarios or pictures. It's highly possible to train them without them being literate. But the goal of the program would to enable them to become literate by the end. So they would also be able to taught to read and write. So even if they want, they can pursue higher education after the program. And they wouldn't be limited to what they learn there. But the possibility would be that there would be a hospital or clinic connected to the school where they could then learn and be a part of the community health care. So they would be able to treat people in the community that are afflicted by issues caused by things like dirty water or unsanitary conditions. There's a lot of issues with cholera and schistosomiasis and malaria throughout Yemen. So they'd be able to treat the people that are afflicted in those areas that are hard to reach and that other foreign helpers like World Health Organization or Doctors Without Borders can't get to ordinarily. So this would be helping both unemployment, literacy, and the healthcare situation in Yemen. It would empower women. Particularly, I would like to focus on women in more remote areas where these opportunities would be very scarce for them. So they would be able to learn a trade and become literate and hopefully create change in their community through their learning and this program. So that is it. Yes.
Is there any room for consideration of using technology in your classroom, like giving women iPads or something where they could connect with a mentor to be outside of Yemen that is going through similar programs?
Hopefully that would be a really interesting way to do it, and that would be hopefully possible later on. Currently in Yemen, there's a lot of issues with like power outages and things like that, so sometimes bringing technology into it isn't the best way to do it. But hopefully if that smooths out and they have better infrastructure and things like that, that could be possible. Yes. Sorry, Renee. Or,
Minimum age that you, minimum age that you would be targeting? Like, at what age could women enroll in the program?
I think it would be more possible unmarried women, so not like super young, but it would be difficult. Hopefully you'd get more married women as well, but it might be easier to get them into the program before they've been married, because then that would kind of inflict like the societal like control over them that they can't really branch out or get an education without their husband's consent. So hopefully it would be a way to get younger women involved in education as well. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you.
I was just going to do a follow-up. Do you see that as being an issue of women being trained, like putting the effort in to train them to be midwives and doctor's assistants, and then once they get married, they get yanked out of that role and they're not allowed to do that? Like, would it be, I hate to say it, but a wasted effort?
Yeah, I see what you're, yeah.
Or should?
I would hopefully the program would help address that through like hopefully this would be a positive change, and I would like to start it with a few women that are willing to face that risk possibly. I mean, a lot of this could also be a program where divorced women or women whose husbands have died or deceased, they can maybe go to this program and learn a new trade to help put them back on their feet, because that is a problem. Women that are divorced or widowed are kind of shunned in Yemen society, so that could be a way to help them find a path in life as well. So, and again.
Do you think that a lot of women want to do this? I read an article the other day in India, as more and more women become better educated, and that will ultimately make them less available for male suitors because they might be more educated than the men they're supposed to be marrying. So maybe do you think that might be something you run into?
That might be a possibility, yeah. Hopefully, as change happens in Yemen society, that would be less of an issue. But starting off, it would probably be, yeah. Not sure how to address that particularly, but yes.
One last question, Lauren.
Would you consider an awareness or education program for men, starting them at a younger age to address that social issue and kind of bring about social change that way?
I didn't really consider that, but that would be a good way to do that. A lot of the issue arises in like the Islamic culture or the Islamic religion itself, although I think we've kind of learned that that can be worked around. So hopefully that is changed at some point.
Thank you. All right, everyone, let's welcome Marissa to TED.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a concept called brain drain that's in the Philippines, and this phenomenon is having an impact on the healthcare system in this developing country. But before I get into terms of what that means exactly, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Marissa Albert, and I am a freshman nursing student at the University of Rhode Island. My mother is from the Philippines, and this has allowed me to travel to the country starting at a very young age. Today, I want to briefly describe my past experience I had when I traveled to the Philippines. The last time I visited was 5 years ago when I was 13, and I remember that as soon as I walked out of the airport in Cebu City, I kind of tensed up in confusion and shock. And as I was getting in the car, I was just so shocked about how different it was in comparison to Kingston, Rhode Island, where I grew up. And so as I was in the car, we reached a stoplight and people would come up to the window and they kept knocking, and I wondered what they were doing, so I asked my mom, and she told me that they were begging for money. And at first I began to look out at the window, and some would peer in at like the boy in this picture, and then I remember feeling a gut sense of like kind of hopelessness, and because there were children my own age, like the boy that would look in, and I didn't want to look out the window anymore because I had a feeling of guilt because here I was just sitting in a car and I was on a vacation, and this was just daily life for them. And that was something that resonated with me as on my trip, and as I continued to go through my whole weeks there, it kind of was always stayed in my mind as I experienced similar instances. And obviously it is something that I remember to this day and acts as a personal anecdote that there is still much to be done in countries just like the Philippines. When I was there, I had the opportunity to experience the education system. So this is a picture of Sacred Heart School, where my cousin attended, and I mean, I guess you could say it's a school like no other, like it says in the picture. It was an elementary school and a high school, and it was very modern. It had Western style, and I could understand all the classes. They were in English, and all the students in the class seemed to be motivated, and they wanted to become professionals with the hopes of aspiring to be like engineers or doctors or whatever they could do. Unfortunately, when I was there, my father got sick, and he ended up in a hospital, and this was the hospital he stayed in Cebu City. And this was my first exposure to the healthcare system in the Philippines. And when I was there, I remember just sitting, waiting in the crowded rooms, just watching everybody, and they were waiting to see that one solitary doctor. And there was no such thing as appointments, and it was just that this was their only opportunity to receive the care, and they'll wait as long as they could. So yes, when I was there in the city, the healthcare system could be considered functional to the point, since my father did receive proper care he needed. However, that was in the second most populous city in the Philippines. So fast forward to November 8th, 2013, and there was a devastating typhoon that struck the Philippines. The typhoon killed at least 6,300 people, leaving more than 4 million people's homes destroyed or severely damaged. The areas that were hit the hardest were the ones that could not afford it the most. Even 5 months later, it was recently in Philippine news that dead bodies are still continuing to be found. Many of these houses that were destroyed have not been rebuilt, and those in evacuation centers remain uncomfortable and overcrowded. Many people are simply leaving due to poor conditions and are not returning. So the question is, what has happened to healthcare after such a disaster, and how does it play a role in the country's previous status? So the answer is that there has been a silent crisis that has been building up for many years in the Philippines. This past February, the Department of Health in Manila announced that the Philippines is facing a health workforce crisis. Right now, there are 7 doctors for every 10,000 Filipinos, and there should ideally be 10 to 15 doctors. According to the Department of Health, the shortage of doctors is due to a lack of interest among young people to pursue a career in medicine, coupled with the fact that many practicing doctors are eventually leaving the country in order to pursue opportunities in countries such as the United States. So that brings me to the problem that I talked about in the beginning, called brain drain. So brain drain is defined as the migration of skilled workers or highly educated individuals from a developing country to a developed country for better opportunities. And coincidentally, the Philippines is the world's top labor exporting nation, one of the world's top labor exporting nations. This is occurring for a variety of specialties, but the loss of healthcare professionals is a hindrance on the growth of this country. The poor environment of this country is due to negative issues that contribute, such as lack of finding jobs and poverty. Other countries, due to their progressive conditions, appear attractive to those aspiring for better lives. So ultimately, many Filipinos that have the ability to pursue those top careers understandably strive for a better quality of life that they see overseas. So as a nursing student, I obviously am interested in what's happening to nurses in the Philippines. Nurses and midwives in the Philippines represent the biggest group of professionals deployed overseas to places such as Saudi Arabia, the UK, and the US. But there are other discrepancies within the nursing profession as well. There is a mismatch between those that have the opportunity to receive a nursing degree and the occupation they end up applying for. Many have given up the possibility to find employment as nurses and have decided not to pursue the occupation for which they studied for and are qualified for. So for example, my cousin is recently graduated as a nursing student this past spring, and right now she is currently working in a hotel. And when I asked her if many of her peers received jobs as nurses, she responded that many of them recently graduated, are not employed as nurses, and are waiting for a hospital to call them because they are taking up different occupations. So then I thought, if the Philippines is in a health workforce crisis, why are newly graduated nursing students finding other occupations versus filling the need of healthcare workers? And also, what is happening to those rural communities that might not have medical workers at all and are suffering the consequences of the typhoon? So I did some research, and I found something about the idea of rural healthcare. So I found that currently underway, there are small practices that have represented a different approach to traditional medical education through the University of the Philippines' School of Health Sciences. Students that have come from rural areas, train in rural areas, and a vast majority, so 98%, will work in rural areas after they have been qualified. The students are set or nominated by their communities, and it is agreement between the school and the student and the community that after that program has been completed, the student will go back to serve the community. The school executes a type of stepladder type curriculum where the students receive a baseline education, and they will start as midwives, and then they will carry on to a nursing program. In some cases, where the community nominates a student, it then will pay for the student's tuition. It is based off the basic concept of the government recruiting students to become health professionals and then give back to their community. But this is not the only case. Another study tested medical education in poor rural areas taught by volunteer faculty, and that has been proved sustainable. It has been found that 80% of individuals taught through rural healthcare model remain practicing in underserved regions in comparison to the national average of 68% of Philippine medical graduates that go to practice overseas. So pretty much when people are educated within their own communities, then they will want to stay. And it has been more of a trend that if they go off somewhere in a city and then they are just educated and then they just will want to leave. So it's the idea of making them connect to their sense of community and want to stay in where they live. So my wish. My wish is to collaborate with universities throughout the Philippines and initiate branches of rural healthcare models like the ones I talked about earlier. There should be no reason for graduated nursing students to look for employment somewhere else or even for a different job if that's what their education they received. Programs like the one I mentioned earlier have been proven effective and are only small steps to address the need for healthcare workers in those outlying communities. However, what I propose is that institutions such as the University of San Carlos in Cebu City, where my cousin attends, could allow opportunities for newly graduated nurses such as my cousin and her peers to travel to rural areas after they graduate and aid in community training. And they can aid in community training nominated by students from rural areas as well. And perhaps if they choose to, they can continue to become doctors through programs that the University of the Philippines created. The Philippines is not completely inadequate in combating the health worker crisis that it is currently facing. There are schools and a structured education system in metropolitan areas that I have seen for myself that have the power to outreach communities that have been devastated by the typhoon or simply just lack health care. There are also individuals available in cities such as Cebu that have not just been utilized in the current workforce since they are not directly needed within the city themselves. So why not use those individuals that are working in hotels or somewhere else in the areas that actually really need them? So it should become an initiative to create more rural health education models to allow the Filipinos that possess the education and capabilities to seize them in order to make changes in their country and ensure that valuable citizens do not leave in hopes of getting better opportunities somewhere else, but in their own country where they can stay and practice medicine. Thank you. Questions? Yeah.
So what is the underlying issue with these large classes of nurses that are
Right.
graduating and then don't have a place to actually practice if there's so few doctors to population? Like,
Right,
what
and-
are you doing about that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and like the idea of what the University of the Philippines was doing was that if they start as midwives and they go as nurses, and then if they choose to, they can continue on as doctors. So I know there's a big discrepancy between doctors and nurses, and there's this obviously this influx of nurses where like my cousin lives, and that they're just working in hotels, so or whatever they can find. That if maybe there was some type of initiative that like is through the communities of the universities that they will then send like they're recently graduated through to such rural healthcare problems, then maybe with those students working there, then if they choose, they could possibly continue on to doctors and kind of fill in the need and also train more people to become nurses and inspire them to help out in their community as well.
Okay, so the issue is that there are hospitals, which is where the doctors and the nurses work, but there isn't this rural.
Right, and then those are the ones, because like, so like in Cebu, where it's in the metropolitan area, there are enough in hospitals right now, so then there is an influx, but there are so many people that are there, but why, there should be a way that they can find an outlet to go to the out communities, and that's what I was trying to propose.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So would you offer some kind of scholarship incentive for these people to go to certain areas and learn there?
Yeah, well, you know how I know here at URI, they have the nursing program where they do go to the Dominican, so I was thinking that perhaps if it is part of this type of thing within the universities in the Philippines, it could be some type of scholarship thing or some type of program where they go for an extended period of time to work in these kind of rural healthcare situations, then it could be like a type of scholarship thing. Yep.
Kind of along the same lines as your question,
Mhm.
related, but how would you convince some of the students to go to certain rural areas? Like in the Visayas, which is the
Right.
region that was really affected by the hurricane, or Mindanao, which is the conflict-ridden area.
Right.
How would you convince the students, that they would go to one area versus the other?
Right. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to say because it does depend on the person, but I think that especially if this would to happen in universities, it could also be employed in like in this picture of the school that I showed, that just explaining the situation and what's going on. And I feel that if the people that are told or explain what's going on, that they could try to help and see, and that it's also an opportunity for them as a job, as opposed that they're actually working at what they're trained to do, as opposed to not just like working in a hotel or something else. And it was just a waste of their education if they can't find a job as a nurse. Thank you.
All right, everyone, please welcome Morgan to TED.
So, I'm Morgan Rudich, and today I'm going to introduce my idea for TED. Today's Tuesday, so I figured I'd talk about how TED Talk Tuesdays. So, I'm sure you've seen one of these before. Now, these are masks that are supposed to prevent particles from coming in and prevent you from releasing those particles into the air. But what's the problem with these? Is they're disposable. You can only use them once sometimes. They can get dirty. You have to throw them out. And then they cost around $12 each. So if you're only using it once and it's $12, you're spending a lot of money on masks that are only going to be used once. And you've probably seen one of these too. This is actually like a moisture one that like moistens the air for you as it comes in, which is kind of interesting. However, this is also expensive. It's $17, and you can only use this once if you get dirty, because you can't really replace the filter that's like around it. So now hopefully you've never seen one of these people walking around in public with one of these on, but these are actually, sometimes these are used for fumes, gases, people are doing working with paint. But they also have filters that actually prevent particles from coming in, which is like 0.3 micrometer filter. And so, however, this, although it is reusable, unlike the other ones, this is also $153. So for people that can't really afford it, then you're gonna have to either use disposable ones or breathe in all those fumes and particles. So this is in China. Now, if you go to China, you'll probably see a lot of people walking around wearing these masks. These are disposable, they're cheap. People throw them out every day and get new ones, or they keep reusing it, which is not as healthy. They do this to prevent cold, coughs, influenza, people that have TB just walking around, or they also, if they don't have any of these things, they prevent themselves from getting it. So what's the problem with those? Is that they end up here in places like India where they don't have landfills, like proper sources to dispose of them. So they just end up here in whatever land possible and build up and cause distress to not only the rest of the world, but to animals alike. So basically, animals can't survive in this environment. And I think we all know that. We all know that like there's no land for this cow to graze. There's no land anymore. Once this pollution causes destruction, that there's nowhere but this animal to just sit there and lay on this bed of polluted area. Or if they don't end up here, they end up in a big pile like this, where people in India will sometimes even lay on this, sleep here. Looks like there's a tent here. Someone's staying in this environment, maybe collecting, trying to find things for them to actually gather for their own families or what have you. And then, so obviously there's many issues with this. I'm sure you could probably point out at least 10 obvious answers as to what's wrong with this. This is a huge mound. People are living on this, is subject to disease. Who even knows what's in this mound of pollution and dirt and trash? But what isn't known about this problem is that this could possibly be filled with these masks that people are disposing. And TB can actually, if you have TB sputum and you have TB, and if you cough, that sputum is actually active. And it can be active for actually months. And you're throwing this out, and it's going inside of this landfill. And animals like this, they're laying in that. Especially for influenza virus. People have influenza, and they cough, and they get that germ, and it can actually live on an inanimate object for at least 2 to 8 hours. Those 2 to 8 hours are very crucial in where they're going. So if someone's picking this up someone's picking up a mask on accident just to like get it out of the way, and the influenza virus is on it, then they could spread it. They can get it. Same with TB. It's there for a month active. Say an animal ingests one of the TB masks for whatever reason, because animals can't really find anything to consume except in this environment. So what if they get TB? Then it's passed through their milk and then it's spread to more people. So what is TB? So basically it's spread through coughing, especially with sputum and blood. So sputum is actually it comes directly from the lungs. It's like a phlegm substance. And so it's spread through the air, an infected person coughs, sneezes, or speaks, and others who breathes in the air. So 1/3 of the world's population has latent TB, which is not the active TB, but is also means they once had it, but their immune system was strong enough to fight it at the time. And where it's most prevalent is in India, which consumes a large portion of the actual TB instances. So let's think about the size of, say, TB. So TB is about 0.3 to 0.5 micrometers large, which is like somewhere before there. And basically, most HEPA filters for the mask can actually cover that, can actually prevent TB particles from coming in with that microfilter, which is a very good instance, but like I said before, they're disposable, and they can also be, the bacteria can still be spread because nothing's being killed, it's just staying on the mask itself. So what's my idea, my solution? So, excuse the drawing, I have a broken finger, so it's hard for me to write with it, but so what happens here is that this is the nose piece, and this is the mouth piece. And it's smaller, and it doesn't use as much material as a regular face mask would. And so these two are chambers, and they're made of 100% recycled plastic, which means they don't use any material, like too much material, where it's which is causing a lot of costs and a significant amount that people can't buy it. However, the nose piece is actually a filter. It's the HEPA filter, which means that it's US government standards of removing 99.97% of particles that are coming in, which are mostly 0.3 bacterial particles, 0.3 micrometers. So these chambers, what happens is the left chamber is actually just has a filter in the beginning of it, which oxygen comes in through the 0.3 HEPA filter. Once the oxygen goes through, the air you're breathing in is already purified at that point, so you can't take in any more particles. And then when you're breathing out, what happens is when you exhale, this opens through right here. When you breathe out, this is a filter, and it filters out the oxygen, so the oxygen can be released. However, it also pushes this down, which is 80% ethanol, which is known to kill TB and influenza virus. So what happens is the TB or influenza virus can escape through this because the filter is smaller than the actual bacteria or virus. So then what happens is this closes down, the virus or bacteria goes in through this side, and then this closes back up after you exhale, and it gets trapped in here with the ethanol. Right here is where you insert the ethanol, and right here is a plastic covering, which is removable if necessary, that doesn't allow anything to get through. So I bet you're all wondering, how do you know ethanol can actually kill these bacteria? Well, there's actually been a study where 80% of ethanol actually kills tuberculosis bacteria in 30 minutes. So only 30 minutes does it need to be in that chamber for, and does it need to be killed. There's also another study that I don't actually have in front of me right now that is influenza virus, which it actually kills in 15 minutes. So my idea is to have this be created, to have this be everywhere around the world in clinics and be able to be given to people that do need it, that have TB, influenza. So prevention is key, is what I'm trying to say here. And by using these, prevention can be not only restored, but it can also be advanced, in which the bacteria or the virus can actually be killed in the mask instead of being spread about and staying in public and pollution and spreading more disease and bacteria. That's it.
Thank you. Two questions.
Are there any negative effects if that mask were to malfunction and someone were to breathe in the ethanol? What are the effects of that?
Well, I obviously thought about the effects of what would happen, but actually if you look at the picture, which I don't have up anymore, but what happens is it's actually curved. So even if you were to be like upside down, it's curved so that it would like curve back under so the ethanol like is staying inside the chamber, and the chamber is actually curved as well, where the ethanol is. So it's not like loose inside of a square, but it's more of like a circular like way for it to stay in. So there is less likely of that happening because the way the curvature is.
You started at the beginning talking about the pollution in India. Is that where you would want to start this program, or where are you targeting first?
Well, mainly I talked about India because obviously TB is most prevalent there. So if I were to do this especially for TB, then yes, I probably would start with India, probably make my way to Thailand, other like areas that are prevalent in TB, but I think it's also important for influenza virus, especially now. So it's not something that should just be secluded to one area.